To marry her, I made a bet with my father. I would go abroad to expand our overseas operations for a year. If I hit my targets, I could marry her upon my return. I accomplished the mission in just 10 months, surviving several near-death experiences along the way. When I finally came home, I was told she was getting married today and the groom wasn't me. In disbelief, I went to the wedding, only to see an ambulance parked outside. Paramedics were efficiently lifting her, still in her wedding dress, onto a stretcher. "Hurry, the patient's water is broken." I calculated the dates and thought the child might be mine. But after giving birth, she leaned into Ethan Hale's arms and said scornfully, "I've just given birth to the heir of the Clark family. You? As if you're worthy of fathering my child." The thing is, Ethan Hale was just a stand-in my father had arranged to ensure I, the sole heir, grew up safely. I am the real heir to the Clark fortune. Chapter 1. Sincere, you're back? A get-together? Not today, I'm afraid. I'm at a wedding. It makes sense they didn't tell you. After all, Ethan Hale is marrying your ex-girlfriend, and you two were so close. I held the phone frozen in my tracks, my voice turning to ice. Who did you say Ethan Hale is marrying? The person on the other end paused, stunned, but answered honestly. Victoria Vance, your ex. I asked for the address. He was worried I'd cause a scene and told me not to come. I just hung up. My girlfriend was getting married. How could I not be there? I stood at the hotel entrance, staring at their wedding portraits displayed on both sides of the door. She was leaning into another man's arms, smiling so happily. In that instant, I felt like a complete joke. During my 10 months expanding the market overseas, I had made enemies by cutting into other people's profits, putting me in perilous situations multiple times. In my most desperate moments, the thought of returning home to marry her was what kept me going. Now, I was back, but she was marrying someone else. How ironic. My hands hanging at my sides, clenched into tight fists. It was the only way I could suppress the urge to storm in and ruin the wedding. I had no intention of attending. Since this was her choice, I would respect it. I turned to leave, but just as I did, I heard a commotion at the hotel entrance. I looked toward the sound and saw a team of paramedics rushing out of the hotel with a stretcher, and the person groaning in pain on that stretcher was none other than Victoria Vance. Her wedding dress was hiked up, revealing a swollen belly. A paramedic was patiently guiding her breathing. I stood blankly for a moment before the situation sank in. A sharp pain shot through my heart. She was already pregnant with Ethan Hale's child? As I was trying to process this, she was loaded into the ambulance. I overheard some gossip from behind me. I heard Victoria and Ethan haven't been together for very long. You don't think Ethan is raising another man's kid, do you? If so, it must be true love. He's willing to be a cuckold for her. My heart, which had just hit rock bottom, was suddenly in my throat again. I calculated the dates. The child, it really could be mine, even though we had only had that one reckless night before I left the country. But what if, with a sense of trepidation, I quickly hailed a cab and headed for the hospital. The ambulance blared its siren, and all the cars made way, so of course I couldn't keep up. By the time I arrived at the hospital, Victoria had already been moved from the delivery room. The baby was in an incubator, and she was lying weakly in bed. When she saw me, her brow furrowed. "What are you doing here?" I didn't know why she seemed to loathe me so much, but I still asked the question that mattered most to me. Is the child mine? The moment I spoke, she burst out laughing. That sharp ft was dripping with mockery. I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it from her own lips. After a long moment, she wiped a tear of mirth from the corner of her eye, finally stifled her laughter, and spoke, enunciating each word. "Sincere Clark, I gave birth to the Clark heir. You, as if you're worthy of fathering my child." With that, she feigned weakness and leaned into Ethan Hale's arms. "Honey, can you get someone to throw him out? He's so annoying." I watched the two of them nestled together, her words Clark heir echoing in my mind, and I didn't know how to react. Because I am the true Clark heir. Chapter 2. When I was born, my father was in the middle of a power struggle with other factions of the family. Fearing his rivals would harm me, he had me and Ethan Hale switch places from a young age. Ethan's entire family signed non-disclosure agreements, and had kept the secret perfectly for all these years. Because Ethan and I grew up together, we had a decent relationship. The plan was to reveal my true identity when I returned from abroad, but I never imagined that Victoria, who had repeatedly sworn to build a future with me, would marry someone else while I was away. I looked at the blissfully happy Victoria and asked one final question. Did you ever love me? I just wanted the truth. I needed to know if our entire past together had just been a fantasy she'd constructed for me. Of course not, she denied without hesitation. If it wasn't for Ethan, I wouldn't have even given you a second glance. So, I was just a stepping stone for her to get close to Ethan Hale. I didn't know how much of her affection for Ethan was genuine, but it was clear she had never felt anything real for me. Years of devotion, all for nothing. Thinking back to how I'd stood before my father making that bet, I felt like a fool. I stood there, stunned for a moment before Victoria spoke again, this time with impatience. Get out if you don't, I'm calling security. In that instant, all my pride was shattered, trampled mercilessly by her. I gave her one last look and turned to leave. I went straight to the office to report to my father. By an unspoken understanding, neither of us mentioned the bet. My father patted me on the shoulder and said, "The situation at the company has all but stabilized. In a little while I'll find the right time to switch you and Ethan back." I nodded and quietly returned to the secretary's office. Officially, ever since graduating from college, I had been Ethan Hale's secretary, but behind the scenes I was doing the work of a vice president. I buried myself in work, trying to numb the pain with sheer volume. I worked through the night, my meals sporadic. One day there was a sudden knock on my office door. I was surprised to see who it was. Sylvia Hale, my adoptive sister. She was carrying a thermos, looking innocent, but I could see the calculating look in her eyes. She poured me some porridge, saying she'd heard I hadn't been eating well lately and had made it specially for me, hoping I wouldn't be angry with her brother. It seemed like she was bringing me food, but she was really pleading on Ethan's behalf. I didn't blame her. She was, after all, Ethan's biological sister. Still, it sent a chill through my heart. I was sure I had always treated her well since we were kids. I lost interest in talking to her and used work as an excuse to send her away. But I never expected to receive a distress call from her that very night. Chapter 3. I was still working late at the office. She suddenly video called me. Though surprised, I answered. However, the face that appeared on the screen wasn't hers, but Victoria's. She should have been at home recovering from childbirth, but her eyes were wide with fury, blazing with malice. There was no sign of a new mother's weakness. The background was strange, too. It looked like an abandoned, damp warehouse. Just as I was about to ask why she had Sylvia's phone, she helpfully turned the camera around, pointing it at a woman tied to a chair. Sylvia was bound tightly with ropes, her cheeks swollen and red, a trickle of blood at the corner of her mouth. She had clearly just been beaten. I frowned and asked what she thought she was doing, telling her to let Sylvia go immediately. She snorted. "Sincere Clark, I didn't want to pick a fight with your sister, but she just doesn't know what's good for her. I warned her to stay away from Ethan Hale, but she wouldn't listen. And today I caught her bringing him porridge." "What?" "Trying to swoop in while I'm recovering. Today I'll let you, her brother, see what happens. If you can't control your sister, I'll do it for you." With that, she propped the phone up on a nearby oil drum, picked up a tube from the side, and strode towards Sylvia. I stared for a moment before I realized what she was holding, a feeding tube, and next to her was a container of porridge. From the looks of it, Victoria was going to force-feed Sylvia through the tube. She used to be a nurse, and I remember her telling me that intubation is an excruciating process. The tube goes through the nasal cavity, down the throat, and into the stomach. Even with anesthesia, patients find it difficult to breathe, and now she was going to do it to Sylvia without any anesthesia. Even if she was jealous, this was going far too far. What's more, I'd heard she had resigned from the hospital a long time ago. Whether she still had the skills was questionable. This was a matter of life and death. I roared at the screen. She's Ethan Hale's sister, his biological sister, but my words only made the malice in her eyes burn brighter. She said his precious sister, more like. Chapter 4. Victoria didn't believe me, single-mindedly forcing the feeding tube into Sylvia's nostril. Seeing that I couldn't stop her, I swiped down on my phone and hit the screen record button. At the same time, I used my spare phone to call Ethan Hale and asked a colleague in the IT department to trace Victoria's location. The IT guy was fast. By the time I was driving out of the underground garage, the address was on my phone. While waiting at a red light, I forwarded the address to Ethan and glanced at my phone screen. In the video, Victoria was ignoring Sylvia's agonized whimpers, using a syringe to draw up the porridge and forcing it down the tube. At first, Sylvia struggled desperately, but then her movements grew weaker and weaker, until finally she stopped moving altogether. I yelled in a panic, "Victoria, pull out the tube if she dies. Not even Ethan Hale can protect you," but Victoria was defiant. "Sincere Clark, what nonsense are you talking about? If I had married you, your broke, powerless family certainly couldn't protect me. But now, I'm a Clark daughter-in-law. The Clarks are untouchable in this city, you get it? Forget just punishing her a little. Even if I actually killed your sister today, she'd have died for nothing." Looking at her crazed expression, I thought she'd completely lost her mind. I didn't waste any more words with her and used my other phone to call for an ambulance. When I arrived, Victoria was patting Sylvia's face, but with that amount of force, it was more like slapping than patting. As she slapped her, she muttered to herself, "Hey, stop faking it, that's enough. Don't pretend so hard you actually die." Saying that, she even raised her foot to kick Sylvia. I shoved her aside and checked Sylvia's condition. Her face was pale, her pupils were dilated, and there was almost no pulse in her carotid artery. She was already showing signs of death. I grabbed Victoria by the collar and dragged her over. "Pull out the feeding tube, now she's dying." She clearly hadn't expected me to be so rough with her and stubbornly defied me. "I won't." She was a lost cause. I threw her aside and decided to do it myself. I took out my phone and searched for instructions online, preparing to act. Suddenly, a male voice yelled from behind me, "Stop, Ethan Hale had arrived." Chapter 5. When Ethan Hale saw Sylvia tied to the chair, his eyes burned with rage. With a trembling hand, he checked for her breath. Then his whole body went rigid. After a long moment, he grabbed me by the collar and roared in a broken voice, "I was the one who stole your girlfriend. If you want revenge, come at me. Why would you hurt my sister?" Victoria, standing to the side, was stunned by Ethan's words. How could Sylvia be Ethan's sister? Though she couldn't figure it out, she knew she was in deep trouble. How could she give up the wealthy Clark family she had worked so hard to latch onto? So just as I broke free from Ethan's grasp and was about to tell him the truth, Victoria began to sob tragically. She stumbled into Ethan's arms as if in terror, a button on her collar mysteriously undone. She pretended to wipe away non-existent tears, her voice choked with sobs. "Ethan, Sincere Clark, kidnapped me. He threatened me, told me to get back together with him. When I refused, he went after Sylvia. He said what happened to Sylvia today would be my fate tomorrow. Ethan, I'm so scared." As her last word trailed off, Victoria threw herself into Ethan's arms like a delicate bird, her body shaking with pitiful sobs. Ethan's eyes blazed with fury. He seemed to have forgotten his true identity as he pointed a finger at my nose. "Sincere Clark, how dare you?" I laughed. He actually believed this story full of holes, and he was way too deep in character. He played the part of the fake heir so convincingly. When the truth finally came out, how would he explain it all to Victoria? The thought of that scene actually made me look forward to it. Chapter 6. Sylvia was taken away by the ambulance. The feeding tube had entered her trachea and gotten blocked with porridge. She suffocated to death. Resuscitation failed. Victoria was still trembling in Ethan Hale's arms. Only this time it wasn't an act. She was genuinely terrified. Sylvia's death was clearly not from natural causes, and the doctors had already called the police during the resuscitation attempt. The three of us would have to go to the police station to give our statements. Even though I had once loved Victoria deeply, she had now committed murder, and I had no intention of helping her cover it up. However, I didn't expect to get a call from my father. He told me the company was in the middle of negotiating a partnership with the industry leader, the Sterling Corporation, and we couldn't afford any trouble right now. So he had pulled some strings with the police to have the matter postponed for a week. Only after he repeatedly assured me that the case wouldn't just be dropped did I accept the situation. When the hospital informed us we could leave, Victoria shot me a triumphant look. I understood the meaning in her eyes. She was flaunting the powerful family she had married into. So foolish. Chapter 7. The next day I went to the police station to pick up my new ID. With my official return to the family imminent, my father had arranged for my residency registration to be transferred in advance. My name was also changed. My last name was now Clark. It should have been a quiet affair, but as I was leaving the station, I ran into Victoria, who was out for a walk with her baby in a stroller. She glanced at the police station behind me, her eyes wary. I got in my car to leave, but she blocked my door. "What were you doing at the police station?" "Business," I said. She kept prying. "What kind of business?" I knew what she wanted to know, of course, but I didn't feel any obligation to enlighten her. "What's it to you?" She was offended by my arrogant attitude and threatened me. "You're a secretary under Ethan. I suggest you be more polite to me, or I can have you fired in a heartbeat." I sneered. "Is that so? I'd actually like to see that." With that, I pushed her aside, opened my car door, started the engine, and drove off. I didn't think much of the incident, but I was surprised when, that afternoon, right after I received my promotion to vice president, Victoria showed up in my office. She had a colleague from the secretarial pool with her, and she ordered the person, "Come here and throw all his things out." I leaned back in my chair, watching the arrogant woman before me with amusement. "Victoria, this is a corporate office. It's not a place for you to throw a tantrum." She tossed her long hair and put her hands on her hips. "As the esteemed Mrs. Clark, do I need to file a report just to fire a secretary like you?" Just then, there was a knock on the office door. The director of HR stood at the entrance and nodded at me. "Mr. Clark, your new office is ready. Shall I send someone to help you move your things?" Hearing this, Victoria thought Ethan Hale had arrived. She quickly turned around, but seeing no one, she looked back confused. She was already on edge, and hearing the HR director inexplicably call me by her husband's title, she marched up to the director and demanded, "Are you blind? Where is Mr. Clark?" The HR director was baffled by being dragged into this. I waved her away. Victoria tried to chase after her to continue yelling, but I blocked her path and said nonchalantly, "Victoria, you've been married to Ethan Hale for this long. Did he ever tell you his real last name is Hale? He's nothing but my stand-in. I am the real Mr. Clark." Chapter 8. Victoria looked as if she'd just heard the funniest joke in the world and burst out laughing. "Sincere Clark, did the fever fry your brain? Even your daydreams should be a little more realistic. I know you've always been jealous of Ethan's background, but there's no need to tell such an obvious lie, is there?" I couldn't be bothered to argue with her. I just pressed the intercom button. "Ethan Hale, come to my office." Hearing me, she snapped, "Ethan is your superior. Is that any way to talk to your boss?" My office and Ethan's were close. Just as she finished speaking, Ethan walked in. Her voice softened as she pointed at me and said to him, "Ethan, can you please fire him? He just claimed that he's the real Clark heir. We can't have someone so ambitious working here." I leaned back in my chair, tapping my fingers on the desk, and looked at Ethan expectantly. "Are you going to fire me?" He just stood there, stunned, clearly unable to process the sudden news. Originally, my father had planned to restore our identities after the contract with the Sterling Corporation was signed. But Victoria's deliberate murder of Sylvia had crossed my father's line. My father had been in business for years and had never done anything illegal, but now Victoria was running wild, using the Clark family name. So, my father decided to move up the timeline. For me, returning to the Clark family was no surprise. My father had discussed every step with me. But for Ethan Hale, it was a sudden, life-altering event. Because he was just a stand-in, my father would only inform him at the last minute. Now, faced with my question, he clenched his fists, wanting to argue, but he could only endure it. The promotion notice from HR had already been sent out. His life as the young master was over. He turned to Victoria and said with great difficulty, "He's telling the truth. He is the real Clark heir." Hearing Ethan's words, Victoria froze, staring at him for a long time. Suddenly, she grabbed his sleeve desperately, her voice urgent. "Ethan, you're lying to me, right? You've lived in the Clark household since you were a child. How could you not be the Clark heir?" Her eyes were filled with a mixture of terror and determination as she waited for Ethan to give her the answer she wanted. But Ethan shook his head again. Her strength suddenly drained away. She staggered back a step, her gaze shifting between me and Ethan. Finally, she collapsed onto the floor, pointing a trembling finger at me, and burst into tears. I could see her regret, and so could Ethan. He bent down slowly in front of her. The warmth in his eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, menacing look. He lifted her chin with one finger, his tone dangerous. "Victoria, you once told me that you loved me for who I am. Now that you know my real identity, don't tell me you're having second thoughts." Victoria looked up at him, 1,000 emotions swirling in her eyes. The intense hatred eventually morphed into a forced smile. Of course not. She had already had a child with Ethan. There was no turning back. Victoria had never imagined that the great tree she thought she was leaning on was also using her for support. Although the Vance family was nouveau riche and my father looked down on them, for Ethan Hale, marrying her was a step up. He knew he couldn't be my stand-in forever, so when Victoria came on to him, he gladly accepted. I heard that when they got married, Marcus Vance provided $1 million dowry, probably hoping for some favors from the Clark family in the future. Little did he know, his prize son-in-law was an imposter. I sipped my tea, enjoying the drama unfolding before me. When my cup was empty, it was time for the show to end. I put down my cup, stood up, and walked over to stand beside Ethan Hale. I spoke, enunciating each word. Ethan Hale, from this day forward, you have no connection to my Clark family. Remember to go to the authorities and change your last name. I don't want to see you in the Clark Corporation building again. That day, from the vice president's office window, I looked down and happened to see Ethan Hale and Victoria Vance, each carrying a cardboard box, leaving in disgrace. Chapter 9. In previous years, when I was with the Hale family, my birthdays were always simple affairs. This year, being my first back with the Clark family, my father insisted on a grand celebration. At the party, my father publicly announced my identity and made a point of mentioning that I was single. The birthday party turned into a frenzy, with a swarm of socialites throwing themselves at me. I finally managed to escape to the entrance for some peace and quiet, only to see a familiar figure. I frowned and started to head back inside, but Victoria stepped directly in my path. It was the dead of winter, and she was wearing only a thin nightgown with bruises on her face. In her arms, she held her sleeping child. It was obvious that her life had not been easy recently. In this circle, there are no secrets. Even without trying, I had heard bits and pieces of news. When Marcus Vance heard that Ethan Hale was a fake, he immediately turned on him, not only forcing Ethan to return the $1 million dowry, but also disowning Victoria. Marcus Vance was a promiscuous man with no shortage of children. With Victoria being a lost cause, he had plenty of other offspring eager to please him. Without her family's support, one could only imagine how difficult Victoria's life had become. I counted the days. She hadn't even completed her postpartum recovery. But what did that have to do with me? I had once offered her a golden path, but she chose not to take it. She had made her own wrong turn, and now she had to face the consequences herself. I took 2 more steps back, making my refusal to help perfectly clear. But she acted as if she had grasped her last lifeline, dropping to her knees before me with a thud. The baby in her arms, startled, began to wail. Tears streamed down her face. Sincere, for the sake of the love we once shared, please give me a way out. The commotion was attracting attention from the party guests, who were starting to look our way. But instead of toning it down, she shuffled forward on her knees, holding the baby. This didn't feel like a plea for help, it was more like a public shaming to force my hand. She had always been like this, completely disregarding others' feelings to get what she wanted. But with my heart now completely dead to her, how could I let her succeed? I said loudly, "The child isn't mine." Begging me is useless. That single sentence shattered everyone's assumptions. She was about to say more when a gentle arm suddenly linked with mine. "Sincere, how much longer? We're all waiting for you." It was Miss Sterling, Isabel. We had spoken quite a bit that evening, a well-bred lady with impeccable manners. Although she was speaking to me, her eyes were fixed on Victoria, her intention to make her leave crystal clear. I knew she was helping me out of a bind and gave her a grateful smile. But Victoria suddenly screamed like a madwoman. "Sincere Clark, you told me you would only love me for the rest of your life." I was astonished by her outburst. She had a child with another man, yet she expected me to stay celibate for her? I didn't bother engaging with her further and motioned for security. As the guards dragged her away, her eyes, fixed on me, were filled with hatred. "Sincere Clark, all of you men are worthless. All those promises of undying love you made to me were bullshit. I'll make you regret this." Chapter 10. I didn't take her words to heart, but I never expected to see her on a local tabloid news show the next day. She was still wearing the same nightgown from yesterday, holding her child, looking even more haggard. The bruises on her face seemed to have been deliberately accentuated by the makeup artist, making them look horrifying. She was sobbing and crying for the camera. She claimed the child in her arms was mine and that I was an irresponsible deadbeat. Because we had genuinely been in a relationship, she easily produced photos from when we were deeply in love. This tabloid show was known for its sensationalism and had a large viewership. Instantly, the hashtag #ClarkAirIsScum became a trending topic. My father called to ask if I needed help handling it, but I declined his kind offer. I knew exactly what she wanted. But I was no longer the deeply devoted young man who would have plucked the moon from the sky for her if she'd asked for the stars. She had betrayed me more than once, and this time I wouldn't go easy on her. Her call came, right on schedule. She felt no guilt for slandering me. In fact, she was completely unapologetic. "Sincere Clark, I begged you, but you refused to help me. So I had to help myself. $10 million, that's all I want. Give me $10 million and I'll tell the public the truth. I hear the Clark family is in the middle of negotiating a major contract. I don't think you'd want a scandal at a time like this, would you?" She had done her homework, certain that by exposing this now, I would be powerless against her. But, as before, she was naive, or rather foolish. She only thought about using the power of public opinion to pressure me, but never considered that public opinion could also become a weapon turned against her. Faced with her blackmail, I simply said, "No money." Those two words completely enraged her. She became hysterical on the other end of the line. I calmly pressed the record button, listened for a moment, and then hung up. The public outcry continued to grow. Since I hadn't made a statement, Victoria soon dominated the narrative. Many brands, seeing her newfound traffic, approached her for collaborations. She landed several ad deals with baby product brands, and even started live streaming to sell products. Ethan Hale, apparently seeing the value in this, joined her, starting to sensationalize my relationship with Victoria. He claimed to be a mutual friend of ours who had witnessed our entire love story unfold, calling himself our biggest shipper. When I saw that statement, I genuinely laughed for a long time. I had never seen a shipper marry one half of the couple himself. Ethan Hale requested a private meeting with me. He was a bit smarter than Victoria, not calling me and even choosing a restaurant he trusted. He said, "I know I'm no match for the Clark Corporation. You killed my sister, and your father can protect you. But my sister can't have died for nothing. You should at least offer some compensation, right? Otherwise, even a cornered rabbit will bite." He slowly cut his steak, a rare steak with blood pooling on the plate. Just like what he was doing now, capitalizing on his own sister's death. His sister was dead, and his first thought wasn't to seek justice, but to extort me for money. Right now, the contract negotiations with the Sterling Corporation were proceeding smoothly, and I was absolutely confident I would secure the deal. I didn't even glance at the steak in front of me. I stood up and refused him flatly. "If you're a man, you'll get justice for your sister." On the way back, my assistant held up a tablet and asked, "Sir, the topics related to you and Victoria Vance are occupying 5 of the top trending spots. Should we intervene?" I shook my head. "Not yet. Let's let this play out a little longer." I went to see Mr. Sterling privately, presented him with all the evidence to prove my character, and explained my plan. He was very pleased with my strategy, and we immediately finalized the contract details, agreeing to sign. Chapter 11. On the day of the signing ceremony, I invited a large number of media outlets. Just as Mr. Sterling finished his speech and was about to sign the contract, a commotion erupted in the venue. Victoria and Ethan Hale appeared, with their own camera crew in tow, and of course they had their 1-month-old baby with them. The baby's cries echoed through the conference hall, piercingly loud. Victoria rushed onto the stage and confronted Mr. Sterling, demanding, "Haven't you seen the news online? With his kind of character, how can you trust him enough to sign this contract?" Mr. Sterling's eyes lit up, and he turned to me with an appreciative look. Victoria was completely baffled by his reaction. I had my assistant escort Mr. Sterling out to rest while I took center stage. I gave a signal to someone in the audience, and instantly a familiar voice filled the auditorium speakers. "Sincere Clark, I begged you, but you refused to help me, so I had to help myself. $10 million, that's all I want. Give me $10 million, and I'll tell the public the truth." Victoria stared at me in shock, but this was only the beginning. She had been blackmailing me frequently lately, feeling emboldened by her position in the public eye and saying whatever she wanted. I had answered every one of her calls, and the audio recording was a full half-hour long. She frantically told Ethan to turn off his live-stream camera, but what good would that do? Our contract signing was also being broadcast live. She ran to the control booth, trying to shut off the sound system, but she was stopped by security. After the audio finished playing, a video of her and Ethan's wedding appeared on the big screen, followed by footage from the hospital corridor where she had hurled insults at me. Our live stream had initially been watched by only a few industry peers. After Victoria's stunt, the number of viewers skyrocketed past 100,000. The live comments were flying across the screen. Things had turned around so quickly that Victoria was powerless to stop it, left standing there in a daze. Just when everyone thought the drama was over, Ethan Hale suddenly grabbed a microphone and rushed onto the stage. His knuckles were white as he gripped the microphone, his hand trembling. He was clearly desperate. He pointed a finger at my nose and screamed in front of everyone, "I want to report a crime. Sincere Clark is a murderer." The room erupted. All the reporters surged toward the stage, each one like a wolf spotting a sheep, eager to get the headline. Ethan shot me a defiant look and bent down to pull the collapsed Victoria to her feet. He held the microphone to her lips, urging her, "Tell everyone what Sincere Clark did to you that day, and how he murdered my sister." With every word Ethan spoke, the color drained further from Victoria's face. But lost in his own emotions, he didn't notice, continuing to push her to speak. But then, the police arrived. In front of all the reporters, the officers showed their badges and stated they were there to take Victoria Vance into custody. She just stood there, stunned, and after a moment began shouting that she was framed. Ethan was still trying to defend her. "Officers, she was just using the media for hype. That's not a reason to arrest her, is it?" A police officer stated matter-of-factly, "We're taking her in on suspicion of intentional homicide." Ethan was in disbelief. "How is that possible? My wife wouldn't kill anyone. You must have made a mistake." He then pointed at me. "He's the murderer, arrest him." The police ignored him and took him to the station as well. As the one who reported the crime, I also went to the station. When I arrived, Ethan was sitting numbly in the lobby. From his expression, it was clear he had seen the video. First thing that morning, I had sent the video of Victoria live-streaming Sylvia Hale's murder to the police. They must have just shown it to him. He held his head in his hands, looking at me with despair. Do you think Sylvia will hate me? If it weren't for me, her brother, she wouldn't have died." He tore at his hair, his eyes full of remorse. He looked at me with tear-filled eyes as if seeking some comfort. But why would I comfort him? I was there to add fuel to the fire. I reported him for embezzling company funds. Chapter 12. Ethan Hale was also taken away in handcuffs. During his time as my stand-in, he had used his position to siphon off a considerable amount of funds from the Clark Corporation. The amounts were small each time, but he did it frequently. Before he was taken away, I asked him, "You knew my real identity. Why did you still fight with me over Victoria? You knew it wouldn't end well." He laughed like a madman. "Sincere Clark, we grew up together. It's true that I ate better and lived better than you, but there was always a voice in my head, constantly reminding me that it was all fake, that one day I'd have to give it all back. The older I got, the more resentful I became. Why should I have to be your shield, just because your father was afraid you'd get hurt? Victoria came to me on her own. I didn't even like her at first, but she was your woman, and I wanted a taste. You know what? Every time I slept with her, the thought that I was sleeping with the same woman as you made me incredibly excited." He was still talking, but the police were already leading him away. In the end, it was his own resentment that destroyed him. The day Victoria was sentenced to life in prison, I received a call from the police. They said she insisted on seeing me one last time. I went. Through the glass partition, she cried with suppressed sobs. Unlike her previous tears, this time it seemed like she was genuinely remorseful, but it was too late. She would spend the rest of her life in prison. She finally composed herself and apologized to me, saying she had been possessed by greed and would repay what she owed me in the next life. Finally, she asked if I could help find an adoptive family for her daughter. She said, "After everything, you're the only person I can still trust." I agreed. No matter how terrible the parents' mistakes, the child is innocent. The media attention here was too intense, so I sent the child abroad. The couple was kind and simple. They had helped me a lot when I was overseas. They had been trying for a child for years without success. With everything settled, I went to Sylvia Hale's grave. In this whole affair, she was the most innocent one. And yet, she suffered the most tragic fate. I stood before her grave for a long time, until snowflakes began to fall from the sky, and then I turned to leave. I wished for her to find peace in the next world. The partnership between the Clark and Sterling corporations was a huge success. The new product, riding the wave of the media attention, broke 10 million in sales as soon as it launched. At the celebration banquet, Mr. Sterling brought his daughter, and his intention to set us up was clear in everything he said and did. Miss Sterling was a graduate of a prestigious university, elegant in her every move, and had a wide range of interests. many of which we shared. After just a brief conversation, I could sense the intelligence and talent that radiated from her. This time, my father didn't object. In fact, he strongly encouraged it. In the past, I had been strongly against the idea of an arranged marriage, but this time I didn't refuse. I thought that if happiness came knocking, I should make an effort to seize it.